All it takes is a transpersonal shift of consciousness. A miracle is a positive event in our lives that seems to oppose the laws of physics or the natural order of things. Perhaps miracles are natural events outside of peripheral perception or beyond the limits of human reasoning that gives hope in times of despair or uncertainty. Take a moment and think of all the people who are so commonplace in your daily affairs. They seem to be non-existent or completely invisible at times, such as a housekeeper, security guards, maintenance personnel, students, clerks, groundspeople, local grocer, or even a spouse. At times, gender, race, and cultural groups seem to ride in a perceptual blind spot of social recognition. There is a good chance that even people of prestigious positions, such as a mayor, senator, constable, banker, or your own child's teacher, go unnoticed, and you may have experienced difficulty with their names or would not recognize them at a social function. Certainly, the people that hosted such a function, the workers, the servers, and those that prepared the food and drink dwell in the peripheral blind spot of social invisibility. Could it be that there is an everyday, ordinary, common God, as close as the invisible nose on your face, working miracles in your life? The best illustrative metaphor for the transpersonal experience is the children example. This transpersonal story can be talked about in any social structure without conflict, probably because there is no power greater than a mother's love for her children. Contemporary women of study still suffer social oppression more than any other subgroup in today's society. Positioned at the bottom of the social scale of recognition, she must compete in life for the basic necessities to survive, compounded with the great responsibility of giving birth and caring for children. The transpersonal shift of consciousness is best demonstrated in an unbearable situation forcing subjective attention to focus on the objective world for self-preservation. A typical housewife has no time to herself, let alone time to reflect on inner resolution. There is a lot to be said about unsuccessful attempts of inner reflection and meditation used to gain the higher worlds. A great number of transcendental mediators report that they have gotten nothing after years of practicing the art. The very act of sitting in silence is considered a luxury to those in the battle for life. It is unimaginable to picture a soldier in the heat of battle dodging bullets as his friends drop dead, stop and sit in a lotus position and begin chanting in order to solve his problem or gain peace. Meditation can be an ineffective tool for those involved with the seriousness of life. Then again, if you have time to practice the art in the quiet of nature, it comes as a miracle in times of uncertainty and despair. Surprisingly, desperate situations allow a quick decoupling of mental baggage, releasing the consciousness into a higher state of awareness, even if the aspirant is unaware of the activity. The teacup and the candle examples have their place in certain relaxed climates, such as those that practice meditation. However, the children metaphor can be applied to define the transpersonal result in any situation. Any mother will complain in a loving way that their children are a handful, even if they only have one child. Their attention is always on the child to ensure the child's safety and exposure to wholesome experiences. Seldom does a mother have time to herself. The child's curiosity is an uncontrollable drive, subjecting them to hazards throughout the day. These kids have to get their hands into everything. The mother's normal emotional state is at least a high anxiety. She never has time for herself or self-pity. Her full attention is focused on her children, which causes a shift in consciousness. Her point of view has shifted to the group consciousness of the children and extends into the whole family. The mother is experiencing a transpersonal shift to another world or action, and she is usually unaware of the change. The consequences of her actions have a healing effect on her because she becomes immune to the physiological symptoms of depression, guilt, or vice. She has probably gone further into the other worlds than a monk secluded in a monastery. No longer thinking of herself, she has obtained a higher state of consciousness. She has been relieved from the limitations of a linear or restricted fixed point of view termed linearism. What words on earth can better describe, by contrast, the transpersonal experience, the action required to step over the threshold into the worlds of pure spirit, the ocean of love and mercy? The transpersonal experience is a shift of consciousness to the higher planes of knowing. Transcendental is often a word misused to describe this experience because it gives the impression that the participant is moving from one geographic location to another, say from Texas to Alaska. A well-practiced transpersonal can travel, for example, from the Earth to the Moon to the star Polaris and back to Earth again in the flash of a moment. However, they must first shift into a new state of consciousness, or the individual's consciousness perception must give up some conditional things, such as the body, to defy the law of physics allowing such freedom. In this case, you don't give up the body. It continues to function unharmed, but the I-ness of the being drops the burden and is free to skip across the universe in a flash. This shift is from one set of laws to a higher set of laws, dictates actions of lesser laws of operation in a lower plane of existence. While in the human body, humans operate under the laws and conditions of the material world, which include space and time. There is an established law that each and every human being must be born into this world, which is actually a law of limitation or lesser law. We have thoroughly discussed those things that are invisible to some and visible to others, but common sense is needed if one wants to walk through a wall. On Earth, humans labor all day just to eat, clothe themselves, have a safe place to sleep, bathe, and not to mention the privacy for bodily excretions. In contrast, the heavenly world incorporates a finer body, or a better term is finer bodies. Each body upward is released from more restrictions or limiting laws. The requirement for such necessary things as food and clothing diminish on the stairway upward. Tyler seems to exclude the idea of the eternal soul and the temporary body or spacesuit when defining animism. To suggest that a human can levitate or walk through walls is absurd in one set of circumstances, but not at all impossible in another. Again, the concept of animism confuses ritual and religion with the development of the human intellect. Based on hard physical evidence, ritual and religion developed from cultural and tradition, which I define as something that is held to be familiar or believed to be true by groups of people, or the best a people can do. In other words, humans, as far as we can determine from archaeological evidence, may be technically better off. However, no evidence shows humans are intellectually brighter than the first day they appeared on planet Earth. In addition, their higher awareness, legislative faculty, or law to oneself should never set up self-defeating negative assumptions such as, I am a bad person, I am a failure, or, when ill assume, I will die from an incurable disease. Their inner legislative faculty or lawmaker takes a position much like a professional actor or professional runner in a marathon race to a designated finish line. The racer sees their self crossing the finish line in front of all the others, days or weeks before the race. If these people use a negative assumption such as, I will never make it to the finish line, place a bet with what money you have. On good odds, they will lose. In contrast, the unscrupulous also use the law for power and greed. This legislative faculty is blind to good and evil and right and wrong, and mathematically operates in proportion to the wish fulfilled, which must obey the higher laws of assumption, or a better term is visualization. If the unscrupulous are able to get their victims to visualize a weakness, real or perceived, then demoralization takes over and the victim accepts his demise as a fact. Further illustration of the transpersonal can be achieved by comparison with today's common linear reality by way of a transpersonal quiz. Honest interpersonal skills are required for this extended definition. The following test creates a hypothetical line in the sand between two realities. 1. Have you ever looked at someone on the high end of the social scale and said to yourself, this person made good choices? 2. Have you ever looked at someone on the low end of the social scale and said to yourself, this person made bad choices? 3. Do you think your position in life is the sum total of your previous choices? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you are probably living in a linear reality. A linear reality is neither good nor bad. It is just a state of consciousness with the perception that life is driven by choice or a series of events. A series of events that represent a linear reality or a line from point A to B. Once the mortar of the linear reality sets, it continues to harden into the rock-hard foundation of an individual personality and is subject to the law of that personality. The individual linear consciousness or line person is also a law unto oneself by activating the same universal law or legislative faculty that applies to the transpersonals. These line person profiles establish laws by assumption as real as gravity that can and does restrict their own God-given liberties. In contrast, the transpersonal uses the same law in a positive, constructive way. In many cases, ridiculous and outrageous rules and by laws are set by linear people by the use of linguistic determinants such as stupid, ugly, clumsy, sickly, and weak, which become the marching orders of the day and sometimes for a lifetime. Sadly, they become set in their ways, opinions, and beliefs, closing off the blessing of a dynamic power of limitless possibilities. In other words, how can one achieve success if that person has established a law against it? When confronted, a line person usually retreats by folding itself at right angles, forming a perfect square. Worst of all, they exchange their legislative power to another square or institution and live as a slave. Dominant squares continually battle for territorial rights. These power-hungry warlords ensure self-preservation by demoralization. They denounce any individual thoughts, ideas, or dreams as fantasy unless it is their own. Their own dreams and ambitions always are of a superior inspiration, allotted only to the deserving few. Gazing from a passenger aircraft window, the battleground is clearly defined as a checkered board of no trespassing zones. The earth is marked with an intricate grid of linear fence lines, county lines, and highways dividing his from hers, them from those, and mine from yours. Each little rectangle or box has a signed peace treaty called a property deed, forgiving the murderous action of the past when the land was originally stolen from someone else. The game of boxing in of an opponent by the unscrupulous extends into the very heart of any idea by making such statements as just your imagination, making a clear fence line distinction to their superior ideas. Once the victim accepts that his ideas and concepts are artificial or of no merit, he actually makes his home on the other side of the railroad tracks. The point is, there is no your or my imagination. It is just a lie to defeat someone's dream and ambitions. The world of the imagination, sometimes called the astral world, is the womb of our universe. Without it, we cannot exist. This open frontier belongs to everyone, and to stake a claim or kingdom is nearly impossible. Empirically, you can actually see the astral world by stepping outside your home and looking up at the stars on any given evening. The only way the unscrupulous can gain ground in the astral world is to belittle their opponents into thinking they are worthless and undeserving, thereby using the victims to set up their own laws of limitations. Consequently, the victim becomes their own jailkeeper and prosecuting attorney, keeping themselves in check while the so-called superiors advance, claiming more territorial rights until a monopoly of space collapses upon itself by a spark of ontological reasoning and God-given civil rights. To everything there is a season. Ecclesiastes 3:1. Gregory Odell, San Antonio, Texas, US of A, 2005.